Welcome to the USCHO Frozen Four live podcast for Wednesday. We're live from Harpoon Harry's Crab House in Tampa, just a short walk from Amalie Arena, where it's not just a restaurant, it's an adventure. Harpoon Harry's serving great seafood, sushi, and steak. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley, and here we are live again, this time in Tampa. First of all, from the moment you land at the airport until you get to the hotel and when you walk around here, you know Tampa is welcoming the Frozen Four here.
One of the best cities as a host, and we've known this all the way back to 2012. And I remember when Tampa was first awarded a Frozen Four. I want to say it was around 08 or maybe 07. It was a long bidding process where they were the last of maybe 6 or 7. But it was one of those long, drawn-out preparations, and we all said, Tampa, come on. We did Anaheim. It didn't work that well. Well, Tampa works, and I think you have to give a lot of credit to Rob Higgins and the Tampa Bay Sports Commission and everything that they put into this. And they make it really a true destination event. It's pretty special, and I know that, I love it coming here. It's, 92 degrees today, maybe a little bit hot for me, but I guess I'm complaining now about good things. Regardless, though, it is one of those great destination cities.
Well, I've already got a red face going.
You do.
So I've already, and I haven't been here. I landed at 11 o'clock, and I'm already got a little bit of color. You're right, though. You come in, and I think when you spend the whole winter in cold and you want to go out and you want to walk outside in shorts. You want to be in short sleeve shirts. You want to experience a pool, all that kind of stuff. It's neat. But I will take offense to Jess Myers, who will be on the show tomorrow, tweeted a picture of the sunset and said, tell me why we shouldn't be in Pittsburgh, like a comment like that. And I responded that it's 85 and sunny in Pittsburgh today. So it's everybody's got its nice things. But, no, this is a great setup because the area you're at, everything's within walking distance. You don't even have to get in a car if you don't want to. And here we are back here, third time. This is the third time so Robert Morris and Pittsburgh hosted twice during this time, and they've hit 3 in that whole scenario. So it's pretty cool that this has become a destination, and you're gonna see another couple ones here with Vegas and St. Louis, and obviously a staple in Minneapolis.
Yeah, I look forward to some of the other cities that are coming up, but this has become one of the favorite places, and we'll have banged out crowds tomorrow. This place is sold out, will be sold out. It has one of the bigger capacities
20,000.
in the NHL, so that always makes that even more special, the fact that you can have one of the highest attended Frozen Fours. So it's something that we really look forward to every year.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned those other locations. I think all of them have done a good job. Pittsburgh, you guys had the disadvantage of doing it in 2021 during COVID. Still had the maximum crowd that you could get in there. Still did a good job, and I sure hope that we see it in Pittsburgh again. I think it's one of the really good destinations because everything is so close to the arena there, too.
Well, I think you're looking at, so we're out 3 years, right? 3 more years. So this was my last. I told some people today in the media room that they owe me a thank you because I voted for these cities. So I had we didn't do the Rust Belt tour like Buffalo, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Boston. We went destinations Vegas, St. Louis, here, and then obviously Minneapolis. But I know Pittsburgh's going to bid. There goes out for bid again this summer. So you're going to see really kind of the next 7 sites be determined this summer, and I think it's really cool to be able to. I imagine that Tampa always bids. Rob Higgins does a great job here. He's dialed in. I retweeted yesterday about us being here, and Rob liked it. I mean, Rob's dialed in. He's been here the whole time, Jim? Every one of these?
He won the first bid. He was a very young.
But he got WrestleMania. He's got
Super
Bowls.
He's
done everything here. Yeah. This is small time for what he's done.
He's had the Final Four in men's basketball. Women's basketball. He's had a regional in men's basketball. They really do attract some big events to this city, and I get it. When you look at what we have downtown here, it's all so compact. You don't have to travel that far to do anything in this city.
And over the last 7 years since we were here last, there's been a lot of new construction and development.
Tons.
The hotel we're in was a parking lot 7 years
Frozen
ago.
Fest, the first Frozen Fest.
Yeah.
It's the first time I ever experienced a Frozen Fest, and it really wasn't even frozen.
Yeah.
You had the booth outside.
It was a fest,
Yeah,
at least that had that.
It was packed.
While we've got the opportunity, you mentioned being on the committee, and 2 weekends ago now, we had the regionals. And, when they were announced, and even afterwards, there were people criticizing them. But despite the first round where the Big Ten just blew everybody apart, there was good atmosphere in the arenas. I mean, that Penn State-Michigan game in Allentown was phenomenal. You had good regional matchups. You had good attendance. It seems like everybody did a pretty good job in lining that up. So,
yeah, I said it right off the bat after we talked to Jeff Schulman. Both of us did. I thought they did a great job. I know people really didn't love it in Minnesota. I think they hit a home run.
Nailed it.
They hit a home run.
It is very difficult, I think, to make sure that you put the right teams in the right place, because you want to make sure that the competitive equity remains. They did not change a lot in terms of competitive equity by moving a few teams to be in the right place. And this was, by my estimation, the best attended regional since we have gone to a 16-team tournament in terms of capacity of buildings. I'm not talking about overall fans, because you had some big, but you had the Ralph in there, which is a 13,000 seat state arena. That accounts for 2, maybe 3 regions in a given year in terms of attendance. But in terms of capacity of buildings, you had a sellout in Allentown, you had a sellout in Fargo, you had a near sellout in Manchester. The only one that kind of disappointed was Bridgeport. And that one is the one that probably surprised me the most, because you had Quinnipiac right up the road. I thought that they would have traveled more, but
it wasn't bad. We've seen empty
buildings. I mean, it's pretty bad when you see that building empty. That building was pretty. It still had 4,000 fans in it. It's still half empty.
Yeah, they can hold almost 10,000 in there. So
that one was maybe the only one that disappointed me a little bit. But listen, the regional tournament worked this year. Is that a good thing for college hockey is the next question, because was another failed regional year maybe going to force the committee to look at other options, force the coaches to really get involved? I don't think we're going to see that now. I think we got the atmospheres that a lot of the participating coaches want. So I don't think that you're going to hear a lot of chatter now about, do we need to go back to campus sites? Do we have to do things differently? No disrespect to Denver, but I think we got the right teams here too. I mean, we've got the for the most part. Denver was not playing well at the end. BU was the hottest team in the country, so they're the only swap of the number one.
Well, and it's the highest pairwise in the 16-team era. 1, 2, 3, and 5 making it to the tournament.
Yeah.
So there was some questioning the whole pairwise formula after those blowouts. Of course, who else could you substitute in there? I think a lot of it was some uncharacteristic play. I mean, nobody expected Harvard to play as poorly as they did against Ohio State. I don't think anybody expected the blowout of Michigan Tech. So, you're going to have those games. It just happened we had that the year before, overtime games and 1-goal games. And I'm going to tease into the rest of the weekend, because I know you did it. You teased it on Twitter today. I know there's some controversial stuff going on in college hockey. The blue bloods, the rich getting richer. And I think, like you just said, going to campus sites would really, really push the rich to get richer, because you're going into those buildings, you're going in to play those games. So I think this regional setup kind of really helps keep it where it is and keep as is. And I know they bid out regionals, I think, with this Frozen Four as well. So 3 more years, regionals are bid out. But I think you nailed it right there by saying they're not going to go that way. But if they did, and I know that's you really want to hit on that, the blue blood and the Big Ten-ish type thing right now, and the distance from the top to the bottom, and 2 FCS and blah, 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 blah. But I really believe that this kind of helps keep the playing field somewhat neutral, in using the word neutral site. Yeah, I have begun to really come around on whether or not campus sites work.
I was very much in favor of them maybe 5 years ago. I thought that you had to do it. There was always the controversy of, well, what if you get into a small school being a number one seed? People pointed to Minnesota State not having the biggest building. And I get that. And maybe BU only, 4 or 5, well, they're 550, 600 or whatever they are, maybe a little less than that now. I am back into the camp of regionals work. I still would love to see a creation of something that you don't have in too many NCAA sports where we could have 2 regionals in the same city at the same weekend. You have 4 teams play on Thursday, Saturday. You have 4 teams play Friday, Sunday. You make it
a super regional.
A super regional. You make it almost a Frozen Four like atmosphere 2 weeks earlier.
You get into problems, though. You get into, and not to cut you off, though.
No, it's fine.
Is locker rooms, the quality of practice ice. There's so many different factors that armchair quarterbacks get their computer out and go on the fan forum and do this, and this. But there's so many different factors going into all that stuff. You got to have practice ice. You got to be able to have locker rooms. You got to be able to have this, and then you got to be able to have the hotels for 8 teams. And that's always a big kicker with the tournament committee. One team always feels like they got the shaft in the hotel. They go there and they get isn't full serve where they can't eat their meals there.
Right.
They get something that it just doesn't work, and that's what the committee's always said. But it would be unbelievable if in a perfect world.
It feels like 2 weekends that you get to really celebrate college hockey as a community. You have a lot of fan bases together.
One of the issues that has come up is not enough venues in the West bidding on NCAA regionals. And it is a bid. You have to put together a proposal. I wrote a story on that for USCHO in 2019 when that next round was going. There's some pretty steep financial requirements as well as facility requirements. You've got to make a $150,000 guarantee, at least at that time. I don't know if it's gone up since then. And then you have to have the hotels and the stuff in the facility and the dressing rooms and all that. Is that some area where the NCAA just has to make that, or could they find a way to maybe ease up on some of that to get some more offers?
I think it's actually gone back, Ed. I think they've dropped the guarantee because they wanted to get more people in to host it. I could be wrong, but I think it's dropped back. The problem with all of that comes back to, again, where are you going to get 8,000 seat buildings? Let's say you go to Des Moines, where what's in Des Moines? An American Hockey League team. They've got to give up their building for so many days, and they're not going to want to do that. And there's so much competition with the NCAA basketball tournament that they have trouble hitting the guarantees. And I think those are the biggest things. That if you could guarantee what we just talked about, what you just said about banging it out every year,
right,
you would have people lined up. But it isn't.
No.
I mean, how many times have you seen Allentown?
Yeah, you just don't. If Penn State's not in Allentown, you don't have a good crowd. I mean, it's so Penn State dependent. I mean, even Bobby Moe gets there. You can't pull 7,000.
No.
You have a great fan base and passionate people, but you can't pull 7,000. Penn State still amazes me with how quickly they've grown a great fan base for hockey. And they showed it that last night in Allentown. And obviously Michigan traveled really well to that regional as well.
And you will see, so when we went, we played the Gophers at Excel. And the cost of that building is so much, so they had the tickets were expensive. Remember when they were going through the tickets being $70 for a weekend, and then they started going student tickets. And when have you seen the Excel Center host that, or an NHL? They don't want to give their building up too much. And
that's another issue too. Is if you do go to a super regional and you're trying to do stuff to get into getting the building, just getting an NHL building, because that's really what you require. I think you just said, Derek, locker rooms. How many places have 8 locker rooms that are ready to do it? It's difficult. You have to almost have a subsidiary rink for off days, and you got to move in and move out.
Like a Baxter Center in Omaha with 2 rinks, and some people like that have some really good 5,000 seat buildings, but does that hit a guarantee? And if Omaha's not playing, what's the crowd like?
Right.
I mean, that's where it comes down to.
So I guess the answer is we leave it alone and just keep trying to tweak it.
I think you're right. I mean, you got to hope that you get what you got this year, where you had the one region that concerned everybody was Manchester, and they ended up with the highest attendance. But it was because you ended up with BU and Cornell in the finals. You end up with Denver and Western Michigan in the finals. I mean, you would have been able to hear a pin drop in that arena. But BU, Cornell, I mean, there's plenty of hatred between those two schools. A great rivalry and great fan bases that travel. I mean, Cornell really traveled their fans up there. I was absolutely shocked by how many Cornell fans were in
Cornell
that building.
travels well.
They really travel well, and they proved it. So
you know, maybe me and you have to get on the phone and do some homework afterwards and get Jeff Schulman on here and to ask some of those questions.
That's true. It's very true.
I mean, we got an open slot. Let's get Jeff in there.
Well, we're going to take a break in a couple of minutes here, but just to wrap up this segment, 2 great matchups coming up on Thursday. Just a quick preview of that because we're going to be talking about it all week long here. Minnesota and BU, that should be terrific, and there's some history between those schools. And then Michigan and Quinnipiac, that one, I'm not sure exactly what to expect on that one, whether we're going to... it's going to be a little bit of the irresistible force and the immovable object in that one. But that's not to say that Quinnipiac can't score, too.
No, I mean, you have 4 of the best offenses here in the country. You just also have 2 of the best defenses with it. In Minnesota, I don't take anything away from their defense. Michigan probably is the one defense that you can kind of say, well, that they might have some of their flaws on the back end. But I look at you mentioned rivalry between BU and Minnesota, and they did play some great games back in the days, including Todd Milewski wrote about it. I think it was the 1975 game that did not get finished and had a brawl, and the great story of that legendary game. But it was interesting to hear Jay Pandolfo talk about that today, and he said, I feel like we lost a little bit of that great rivalry with Minnesota because his team reached two Frozen Fours, well, 4 Frozen Fours, but 2 of them, they ended up playing Minnesota in the national semifinal, beat them twice. But he was very sharp in saying, I don't think it's that rivalry anymore, and it wasn't even that great back then. So that's the 90s. Now here we are, almost 3 decades later, and it's really a petered off rivalry. But putting these 2 teams on a stage like that in the national semifinal renew it? I hope so, because there were some real great games between those 2 clubs.
I mean, you're talking, once again, BU, Michigan, Quinnipiac. You go through the whole thing and then throw the top-ranked Minnesota team with 2 Hobie Baker finalists. I mean, this is star-studded. I think if you look at when Pittsburgh hosted, we did well with some fields that you would be going like, whoa. I mean,
Yale, UMass, Lowell, Quinnipiac, and
St. Cloud. Yes. And so we're sitting here going, whoa.
And nothing against those teams.
No,
I mean,
good
I'm
hockey,
UMass,
but they
Lowell, alma mater,
they don't move the needle when it comes to fans and all that and attendance. And this is like the last couple times they haven't struggled to sell tickets. There were still just a few that were on the secondary market day of game that they were releasing.
Right.
I don't think they're going to have a problem with these big names. You got big name schools here, and it should be fun.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the secondary market yet. I will. I'll have that answer by the time we come back in the next segment for sure.
Well, I remember Minnesota when Minnesota was when it was hosted in St. Paul.
2002.
Yeah, tickets were going on the street for $500 a piece for the lower bowl 21 years ago. So
I was offered $700 for my credential right before the national championship game.
Wow.
I'm sorry. Hey guys, I'm sorry. I have youth hockey bills to pay. $700 and I'll live tweet.
I can do it upper level. $192 is the lowest price to get in the door tomorrow.
What's face? Face is like $200, I think, isn't it?
No, it's actually. I mean, it's $375 for the weekend. So you do the math on that?
Yeah, it's divided in half. So.
Downs lower bowl, $600 a ticket.
Wow.
So once again, my credential could be for sale, and if I'm live tweeting, it could be from Harpoon Harry's.
There you go.
Where it's always an adventure.
That's right. That would be some adventure. We're going to take a break from this adventure for a moment, and we're going to come back with our first guest, Joe Bertagna, You're listening to USCHO Frozen Four live from Harpoon Harry's in Tampa.
Passion, talent, development. NCAA hockey offers all that, and its players graduate at a 90% rate. Ben Bishop.
Backhand scores! Wow, what a goal!
Andy Green. And Ryan Miller were stars on campus before the NHL stage. Whether you are a fan or a player, nothing compares to college hockey. Visit collegehockeyinc.com and follow @collegehockey.
Champions of the college hockey world!
I didn't do that.
First time?
All right. Now this time we're actually back at Harpoon Harry's in Tampa with USCHO Frozen Four live. I'm Ed Trefzger with Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. And Jim, why don't you bring in our first guest of the weekend?
Well, a good friend of mine, good friend of college hockey. He is the former ECAC commissioner, the former Hockey East commissioner. He still remains as the executive director of the American Hockey Coaches Association. That's Joe Bertagna. Welcome back. I think you might be the only guest that has been on every single one of these live shows.
Just a lonely guy walking around the Frozen Four looking for something to do and somebody to talk to.
Well, we like talking to. That's a good thing. We were just talking before we get on the air, and now you've been through the commissioner's world. Maybe not as in touch with that, but you're still in the ears of a lot of coaches through the AHCA. It's an interesting world right now, and we teased it a little bit earlier that there does feel like there's a separation out there. There's a lot of ability for schools of larger resources to maybe provide student athletes with more than other schools can provide. It feels like we're getting into one of those interesting dichotomies again.
Yeah.
But how are you hearing things on the street among your coaches?
First conversation I had in the lobby of the hotel when I walked in, I still had my bags in my hand, with a coach who shall go nameless, just railing against his fear of what's, specifically, he was talking about the Big Ten and the resources they have. It's not a new conversation, and when you think about it, college hockey has always been an unusual mix of institutions. When I was at Hockey East, to see Notre Dame's bus pull up to Merrimack College in North Andover, Mass. There wasn't like Notre Dame and Merrimack were playing other sports. But we've always had close to a third of our Division I membership small schools in northern climates that have played hockey for 80 to 100 years, and it always made sense for them to have a hockey program. But as the world changes and rules change, and there's no volunteer coach, and there's transfer portals and all these things, it does certainly seem that it's creating a bigger gap between the haves and the have-nots. The discussion that will take place about, it's already started on now the fourth coach is no longer a unpaid volunteer coach. Some schools might say, well, yeah, we can give a goalie coach 10 or 15,000, and somebody else will say, goalie coach, we're going to have a fourth coach. We're going to pay him 80 to, we're just going to, what do we pay the third guy? We'll pay the fourth guy. And he can work with the goalies, but he can also do this, that, and the other thing. Not everybody's going to be able to do that. One of the discussions we heard a year ago, and you understand, the NCAA is trying to identify where the next lawsuit might come. So the fact that they had a rule that said, yeah, you can have a guy on the ice and coach, but let's all get together and agree that they can't pay him. I mean, that wouldn't have stood up. But just like the old restricted earnings coach, that was the name of the position, restricted earnings coach. So the other discussion they were going to have is, well, somebody's going to say, how can you limit how much money the school can give in scholarships? So we got, as coaches, we did a survey a year ago where they asked us, the NCAA sends surveys to me, I send them out to the membership. We can control squad sizes. So what do you think the squad size should be for your men's hockey and women's hockey? And once we establish the squad size limit, schools will be able to give as much money as they want. It would no longer be the 18.
Right.
Now, that has apparently either been put in the back burner or it hasn't been put before us in a while. But so we were spending our time identifying 26, 27, 28. How many people do you want in your squad? And then you can give as much money as you want. Well, that's another one that would separate the schools that can give a lot of money and the schools that can't. So I think on the first weekend when the regionals came and all those big scores coming out of the Big Ten schools, I think they had 36 goals in 4 games. And I saw the first half of Harvard, Ohio State at Bridgeport. That might have been an aberration, but that just fueled what people were saying, like, look, this is the future, guys. They're going to be able to beat up on everybody. Now, I don't know what you think, Derek, but that's what people were saying.
Well, first of all, can I guess who that person was who got you in the lobby? Because I probably got the same one, and so Jimmy, we've all got it from him. Yeah. So I could guess that. I think when you're talking about disparity, I think that's the one thing Robert Morris used to be able to beat. I mean, we beat BU, we beat Notre Dame, and I think they're still going to happen, but it's not going to be as much because there's becoming such a separation. And it's going to be harder. It's going to be harder for smaller schools. You see it. I mean, I'm living proof of where schools are struggling and where they're not, of money, how to save money, all this stuff. The more you start adding the costs onto that, you're going to start seeing some schools go, is this the right thing to do? And I think it's been proven that you can't really just go and cut sports now because you're going to end up in a lawsuit. And that's what seems to scare everybody. How do you, as the executive director, you deal with all this NCAA, and do they care about the smaller schools, or is it just driven by the Power 5 and just driven by the big-time schools?
Well, some of the conversation now about they call it a transformation committee.
Yeah.
They're trying to change the way they do business. And there has been some discussion about more self-governance or federation. And those of us like Bobby D and myself have been around a long time. We always lamented, back to the days where they had the convention in January and every school got a vote. If hockey wanted to propose something, and we were 60-0 as a sport, we used to have to present it on the floor of the convention. Like let's say hockey wanted to have a fourth coach 30 years ago, and we were 60-0 before. The other sports could kill it because they'd say, well, if hockey gets it, the lacrosse coach is going to come into my office, then the field hockey coach. So even though we don't have hockey, we're going to vote against that. So we've always had trouble controlling our own destiny. Then they changed it to the committee structure where the Power 5 have more votes. And there's only, the 7 Big Ten schools, BC, and I don't know how many hockey playing schools.
State.
Yeah, there's a few, all right? So we still don't get much say in our own governance. And so we are looking skeptically at when they talk about these new changes, but every time we see that might be more federation, we might allow sports to have more say over their own dealings. We're all for it. I mean, if we could get 60-0 on a lot of things, but we've never had that opportunity to make that mean anything. We could put in, over the years we could put rules in that restrict us more, like the Major A rule that was put in by hockey schools.
Recruiting calendars?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I remember one of the longest drawn-out discussions in Naples was on a recruiting calendar, and then they didn't.
Yes.
Then nothing happened.
I mean, how many hours of your life have you wasted on a recruiting calendar?
They told us this is coming, and the pitch was always the same. If you don't come up with one of your own, we're going to come up and we're going to make you do it. So that scared us. And we spent, I don't know how long down there one year, and then nothing came of it.
But every year that's brought up. Yeah. As in major, junior, they're all.
So the other thing about the transfer portal, I mean, so I've had a bunch of conversations with college coaches who I'd probably say mid-level. They're not the big ones, they're not the smallest ones, and I'll always ask them as a friend, I say, so how is this stuff affecting you? And you hear a theme, well, we sometimes find a diamond in the rough that nobody got, and we go do the work, and we bring him in, and he has a good year, and the next thing you know, he's gone. We did the work, we nurtured him, we found him, somebody else comes down, the big fish eats the little fish. And I said, well, who do you get? Well, we get the guy that the big school recruits, and he doesn't quite pan out the way they thought, and he's unhappy, he doesn't have much playing time, and then we raise our hand, and he comes to us, But he's an unhappy kid to begin with. That's not the way you want to start, bringing in a bunch of unhappy kids. But, Merrimack had great success this year with some quality kids. They had 3 guys that were captain to their team a year before. Now, that's not just transfer portal. That's also affected by the extra year that's going to run out in another year.
2 more years,
yeah. So I feel bad for some of the coaches that just, people aren't transferring to the service academies, and they're not going to the Ivies because they won't allow the 5th year. So there's a bunch of schools that have a little bit of an advantage.
I've been telling people that we had Brady Ferguson for us, who had 160 points in his career, and he had 60 points as a junior. I don't think he comes back for a senior because advisors, agents, everybody gets involved in that.
Right.
And you're going to have a hard time, Grabowski at RIT.
Right.
Places like that have good players as juniors, they're going to lose them as their seniors, or they're going to lose them because they want that opportunity to go to a Big Ten program to showcase themselves for the higher level.
It's happening in women's hockey.
Yeah.
Boston College, 2 of them, they were seniors, but they could have stayed and had their 5th year. They're both going to Ohio State. It almost reminds me of these basketball superstars that want to win a championship. So they get a couple together and they go instantly transform a team into a contender. Ohio State's already a contender, but.
The NCAA has new leadership in Charlie Baker, and it's somebody from Massachusetts. You're familiar with him as a politician.
He's a hockey fan, by the way.
That's a good thing.
We've never been able to say that about an NCAA president before, but he was over in Belfast for the tournament we run in November because there were 2 Mass schools there, and he was finishing up as the governor of Massachusetts. So I sat with him for a period, and he said his father brought him to Harvard hockey games since he was 10 years old, and he was quite knowledgeable about it. So I'm on my 50th reunion committee. We have our 50th Harvard reunion in June, and we're trying to get Charlie to do a panel on the changing nature of amateur athletics, and we've got James Brown from CBS, who's a classmate, played basketball. He's agreed to come back, so I might end up being the moderator with two basketball players on the panel.
Well, politics aside, he has a reputation for being somebody who can bring people together and from different views and maybe get some compromises and so forth. What kind of things do you think he's going to be able to accomplish with the NCAA in this time of turmoil? It seems like he was brought in specifically because of this kind of stuff going on.
The short answer that people would give you at home is that the NCAA wants an antitrust exemption, and he's going to come in and try to work. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of experience with Congress. I mean, he is a consensus builder, and he's a very competent guy. And before he was governor, he was the head of an HMO, I think Harvard Pilgrim.
Yes.
So he's an accomplished guy. But the challenges he's facing with the NCAA is a unique one. Before I wasn't just trying to be glib. I think they are taking stock of where they're vulnerable and looking to head off lawsuits. And the image and likeness one was the first salvo, and you got people trying to unionize, and there's a lot of things going on. Like I said, the changing nature of how many coaches you can have and how much they can be paid and how much money you're going to give. So I think he's trying to probably put out a lot of fires.
We're talking with Joe Bertagna, the executive director of the American Hockey Coaches Association. And when we talk about some of these issues and the separation that's being almost potentially created, was there a timing issue here? Like if you just brought the transfer portal in 1 year and then didn't bring in NIL for another 10 years, and you didn't, it felt like there was a perfect storm of too much coming together at one time. And I understand it's mostly rights-based for the student athlete when you really come down to it, but it really did stir things up in one quick storm.
Yeah, I think some people would say as soon as Terry Pegula's check cleared, that people knew we were going to get to this point on that establishment of a multi-sport conference. As you know, we're 5 single-sport conferences and 1 multi-sport conference. And if you recall, a few years ago, the Big Ten proposed some legislation that they had to kind of pull back.
I do.
I think it was on, refresh my memory what it was. But they did it.
But it was something to really themselves up.
Yeah, and
it was an age limit restriction.
Yes,
if I remember.
yes. And they didn't do
Couldn't
it like
have a 22-year-old hockey player.
One of the things that I've enjoyed maybe the most with my time as a commissioner is everybody got along and everybody realized that we can't afford to be split.
Right.
We're not a big player to begin with. So anytime we ever got anything done, it was in all 6 leagues. And so I think the Big Ten didn't do it maliciously. I think they were just realized, we're supposed to check with you guys? No, they might have said that a little sarcastically, but the answer we would give was, yeah. I mean, that's how we've always done things.
Right.
We've never had one league go off. First of all, we never had a league that could file legislation on their own because you have to be a multi-sport conference. We would have to go through the Big Ten or the Ivy League or somewhere if hockey wanted to do something. Now all of a sudden they're in the hockey business and they can do it, and they did. But to their credit, I think when they saw the firestorm, they pulled back on it because they realized, all right, the rest of the sport we didn't realize it was going to be such a big thing, and so they pulled back.
Pretty cyclical, though, isn't it, though, Joe, in your time as a commissioner? I mean, I remember in Columbus it was all WCHA teams. I remember,
right.
We talked about it before the show that a couple years ago was the NCHC is going to run the table here on everybody. Do you find that in your time that it's been cyclical and eventually it could right itself? And this is the one that scares me. I don't know if it rights itself on this
I think that you are correct that things go in cycles. And I remember the year that WCHA had 4 semifinalists because Bruce McLeod had T-shirts, and every 5 minutes he asked me if I'd seen the T-shirt with the 4 logos. And I was ready to shove the T-shirt down his
Columbus,
throat.
yeah.
But this feels different. It feels different because it's not just a hockey cycle of where the talent's going or where the hot coaches are or whatever. It's external forces creating inequities or adding to it. Maybe not creating them, but exacerbating them. The changes in the NCAA, changes with the pendulum swinging, going towards athletes' rights. And then the COVID thing is temporary, but it adds to the confusion of where people are going. And the agents, I mean, I'd be curious when the coaches meet in Naples, and this is probably going to be one of those meetings where they have coaches only. Sometimes they're open to commissioners or whoever has a badge and walks in. But when they're really sensitive, a lot of times they'll close the door and say this is just for the coaches. And I'm sure there'll be some accusations of some schools being overly aggressive and taking advantage of these transfer rules, and those schools will say it's not us, it's the agents. It's the players. The players talk amongst themselves. Hey, we need a right shot. You'd love it here. I've had a good experience. I heard something the other day that I hope this isn't true, that somebody said that, all-star teams are voted on by whoever coaches nominate to put on the ballot, conference all-stars, that a parent will call a coach in the league, not his own kid's coach, but another coach, and say, hey, was my kid on the ballot? Did the coach nominate my kid? Now, shame on any coach that answers that question, but
right.
if somebody does says, no, he wasn't on the ballot, then the parent goes, all right, we're transferring.
What about this one, that there's an agent of a player on one team, and the kid's going to stay there. I give him credit, he's staying for his 5th year, had over 20 schools call this agent asking if this kid was going to transfer.
Yeah. That's today's culture.
Yep.
This is apropos of nothing, but a group of former Michigan players approached a bunch of us a year ago wanting to name an award after Vic Heiliger. And if you do a little research on Vic Heiliger, there really should be an award named there. Not only did he win, I think, 6 of the first 10 national championships, he was one of the people creating the national championship. He's one of the people who created the HCA. He just had his fingerprints all over hockey. So I felt bad because we told these guys, the HCA already has too many awards. They don't want to add one. The commissioners already have quite a few. We don't add one. I said, you probably have to create one yourself. They said, well, we want it to be the MVP of the national tournament. I said, NCAA won't name an award.
Right.
I finally said to them, I said, you don't want to have a really unique award? Give it to a kid who stays 4 years with the school that recruited him. And, good player, good student, but the key is he has to stay for. And they didn't understand. Like, why is that so unique? I said, read the paper. it is real unique to get the kid that maybe makes an all-star team as a senior, and he stayed with the one that brought him to the dance. And they're thinking of creating one now to honor the kid that lives up to his word and
We
stays.
haven't even talked about decommitment. It's not even a word. Think about it. You can't there's no word decommitment. It's an oxymoron.
So I'm not going to say the name. I was talking to a friend of mine who was a woman. She was in sports broadcasting, and she's going through a divorce and her second marriage, and told us that she's seeing somebody. And they said, "Oh, really? You're not even divorced and just seeing somebody?" She says, "Yeah, if anybody asks you, tell them I'm in the transfer portal."
Well, on that note, Joe, we always appreciate your time, and I think you'll have a very interesting coaches meeting in Naples.
Yeah.
I'll be attending.
We
for the
might
first
want to
time
sell
in
tickets.
31 years.
We might
I'll have to
raise,
buy one if that's
raise
the
some money
case.
for Hockey Coaches Care.
And Joe's last year, right?
I get one more year. Yeah.
One more Frozen Four and one more coaches convention.
Yeah, and then I'm just going to be a PR hack. So
that's
how I started.
I've done that, buddy.
Yeah.
I know you did too. So, but thanks for your time. Enjoy Tampa.
Thanks, guys.
Enjoy the games.
Appreciate it.
We're going to take a break, and we'll come back with our next guest, retiring Atlantic Hockey NCHA Commissioner Bob DeGregorio. That's when we return here on USCHO Frozen Four live from Tampa.
Passion, talent, development. NCAA hockey offers all that, and its players graduate at a 90% rate. Joe Pavelski.
Backhand scores! Wow, what a goal!
Johnny Gaudreau. And Torrey Krug were stars on campus before the NHL stage. Whether you are a fan or a player, nothing compares to college hockey. Visit collegehockeyinc.com and follow @collegehockey.
Champions of the college hockey world!
Well, we're back with USCHO live from Tampa at Harpoon Harry's Crab House, not too far from the arena. I'm Ed Trefzger, along with our regular weekend review hosts during the season, Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley, and we're joined now by our next guest. Why don't you bring him in, Jim?
Well, it's a pleasure, and we have seen Bob DeGregorio around Frozen Fours for decades now. You're one of two retiring commissioners. This sport doesn't have a lot of commissioners that retire. Right. And when they both do them in the same year, you and Steve Hagwell from the ECAC, both calling it a career. But Bobby, welcome in. It's going to be a little bittersweet as your career comes to an end. You have done a lot in this league, Atlantic hockey, and accomplished so much. But what's it like to kind of look back and reflect right now?
To me, it's been a great ride. I mean, I look at the league from when we started in that meeting at West Point when they brought me in to talk to me about being the commissioner, and then said, okay, we'll be in touch with you. And as I was backing out of my parking space, they were banging on the window, park your car and come back in. And I went back in, and we spent the rest of the day arguing about how many, no, they did actually. I listened and took minutes of, how many scholarships there were going to be, the bylaws, when we were going to get started, get the schedule ready, and so on and so forth. So it was from birth. You want to take it that way until we did we lost our first member when we had Quinnipiac leave and go to the ECAC, and then we went through the discussion of expansion. We did increase the scholarships from 11 to 13, and then we took in Air Force and RIT, and then obviously we took in Robert Morris and Niagara, and we're back at 11 again this year as Derek's team will participate in the 23-24 Atlantic hockey schedule. I'm excited about that, excited to have them back. It was very disappointing that we lost them from the beginning. They were always a great representative of the league, and they did a great job. And I think if you look at every one of the programs, they work hard. We've got great coaches in our league. We've come a long way. We're now at the full 18 scholarships within the league, and good news for RIT. They can even give them now, even though they're Division III. The only two that can't is West Point and the Air Force Academy. But to their credit, they voted for the increases because they knew it was important for the league to grow and get better. And then you look at the facilities that have been added and the investment that has been made in facilities through renovation. And the league has just gotten better and better. And the only disappointment, if there was a disappointment, was the fact, Wayne, when the RIT first came into the league, as you all know, went to Ford Field that year for the semifinals, and unfortunately didn't go beyond that. But, it was always my dream that I was hoping before I stepped down that one of the teams would end up in the Final Four and win that championship game. Now, I'm retiring. I'm not dead, so I'm going to be still cheering for Atlantic hockey to get to that Frozen Four, win that semifinal game, and win that championship game. I just think there's a lot of potential. They've got a lot to compete with now other than just the teams. They've got the portal, and they've got schools that have the ability to pay. I think one of the issues that's going to be coming down the line for the commissioners and the leagues is going to be the major junior issue. If you're paying college players now, why can't you bring back a kid from Quebec or Hamilton and let him participate in college hockey? The hard part for me, I just think the portal is a terrible thing as it exists in college athletics across the board because it's created free agency. I know Derek hasn't seen that side of it yet. He's actually, got some players coming in. Yeah, you got some players coming in to help you build that first roster or getting back until you get out there and get your freshman recruits for the 24 class, 25 class. But I look at what's happening to our league. Take Bentley for an example. The best defenseman in the league a year ago jumps in the portal because he gets advice from somebody and he ends up at Notre Dame. His rookie of the year in Atlantic hockey, jumps in the portal and he's going. Two other of his players jump in the portal that were in his lower classes and they're going to Maine. And he's just an example. And there are some. The other one that is a little bit of a disadvantage in our league is also Holy Cross because they don't offer master's programs, so they can't take in a graduate student for a master's program that may not be offered someplace else. They can take in transfers, but not a master's program. And that's the other thing for the two service academies. They don't have the ability to take in master's programs, and if you transfer in there, you've got to start all over again. You've got to become a freshman. So if you're a junior, as attractive as West Point may be now or Air Force may be, unless you want to start all over again, you won't transfer there.
Yeah, Jacques Lamoureux, probably the only one who was ever successful in doing that.
There was one or two at Army, too.
Yeah.
I echo your statement about us dropping the program. I was really disappointed, too.
Well, I know you didn't have anything to do with it, but, that was a heartbreak for me to see the way it happened. And the funny thing about it is I can remember when I was the AD at Merrimack and the original MAC League was going, and at the meetings in Naples, 3 schools drop men's ice hockey.
Yeah.
Findlay, Fairfield, and Iona. And you had coaches down there that were trying to fill schedules, recruiting. They had staff out recruiting, and it was just a shocker. And that's the last thing our sport needs. I think we're going to have 62 or 63 Division I teams next year. If we can ever get up to 72, they're going to have to expand the bracket. They're going to have to, add more teams to the NCAA championship, which creates opportunities, which I think is great for our sport, obviously. So,
what's your proudest moment as a commissioner?
My proudest moment as a commissioner was, I would say, I said it's tough to pick one, Derek. I'd say there were a couple. Obviously, when RIT made it to the semifinals, that was a thrill to see us to get a team there. But also, we've had a couple of players get into the hat trick for the Hobie Baker. And it's not about my success. It's about I want to see our players do well. I want to see our teams do well. I want to see our teams win that NCAA championship. We've had some Derek Hines Award winners. We've had a humanitarian winners. The success of our student athletes, to me, is the most important thing. And if you look, and I think it was 109 last year, student athletes that were on the all-academic team for the league. I mean, those are the important things, that we've got a great sport. We've got great schools academically. Student athletes are graduating. They're moving on. Some are moving on to the NHL and the other, Canadian leagues and the professional league, and you've got some going to Europe to play. We've got a lot that are in the ranks of coaching now, which is great, as assistant coaches, which I just think is another. To me, that's a tribute to the coaches in the program, because they've influenced young men that have played the sport. So they've seen how their coaches worked, and they've elected to get involved in that career field, which I think is tremendous that they passed that on. I really do.
We're talking with Atlantic Hockey Commissioner Bob DeGregorio. Bobby, I want to go back to what you were just saying about when Iona and Fairfield had left the league. I remember being close with Frank Beretti at the time at Iona. He was absolutely heartbroken, and you had Findlay leave right around the same time. Atlantic Hockey, it was not that much later that they formed, that you had to form a league. And it was probably one of the least stable times for a lot of the programs. Can you think about back to that and realize now how stable your programs are? I mean, I'm sitting next to school. I'm saying stable.
Whoa.
But you're back.
Yeah,
you're
we're back.
Well, something that was.
I do feel like the stability is something that's important.
At my meeting at West Point, I remember saying to the directors who were there, I said, wasn't too long ago that when this league was under another umbrella, that schools dropped the program like that. I said, I don't want to lead a league that in 6 months people are telling me, oh, by the way, Bob, I'm sorry, we're dropping the program. And they were unified at that point, that they were moving forward in hockey. And that was a strong reason why I took it. And I knew the people in the room very well. Jack McDonald was at Quinnipiac. Bob DeFelice was at Bentley. Bob Burke was at AIC at the time. I knew all of the other directors, and I felt that it was the right move in the right direction. And I'll tell you what, they came together. The only issue, and I think Derek knows some of the history on that as well as the other coaches, was always the issue of scholarship and where to start and how to start. And I tried to be the mediator. I tried to say, well, don't start at 11. If you start at 12, you can put 3 in each class, and that's 12. And when the vote came, I think 12 lost by 1, and we ended up with 11. But I didn't care. We started. That was big.
You used the word mediator, and I mentioned this to you when we talked, when we ran into each other a couple of weeks ago. One of the things that people may not understand is that as the commissioner, you don't get to just be the dictator and call all the shots. You've got to build consensus among athletic directors, and hopefully they communicate well with coaches, and maybe that doesn't always happen. But you've had to steer a ship that really takes into account everybody's different opinions.
Correct. And service academies, state schools, parochial schools, everybody has a different opinion, different thought. It's getting them to come together. And Derek can vouch for this. You can be in the coaches' meetings, and you can't get very, very seldom do you get an 11-0 positive votes. It's 7-3, 6-4. There are different opinions. But the directors are the ones that really, in order to get things to move forward a lot of times, it was not just getting him in the meetings, but making sure I talked to them before the meetings, going over the content of what the issue was. I mean, it would have been very easy when we went to 13 scholarships for the 2 service academies and RIT who couldn't give them, to flat out vote no, which would have killed, because the others would have fell in line with them. But instead, because of the communication, because of the belief on their part that and we had to grow, they supported adding those scholarships to raise up the status of the league and the ability of the league. All the way through 18, when we moved from on-campus sites the first time to experiment and explore the opportunity of having a championship at a neutral site. It was like 2 years of discussions and me going around to different places trying to find the perfect situation. And then when you made that presentation, you had to make that presentation so they all believed it was the perfect situation. And Rochester gave us financially the best proposal at the time, and we ended up going there. And obviously, at the beginning, when RIT was in there, we drew very well. But when it's like anything else, if they're not in there, you don't draw, and that can hurt. But when we were playing at home, we took the whole tournament one year, the first year that we had it, to West Point. West Point opens up with the bottom seed AIC. They beat them. After that, we had nobody in the building except me, Gino, the officials, and maybe 100 fans. It killed us.
I was there.
By then, yeah, that's right. You were there. But that's just an example, and that affects what? That affects income. That you don't generate revenue. You got to increase the dues to make your bill. You want to improve the league. You want to grow the league. You want to make it better. You want to improve branding. You want to get exposure, and then of course the worst thing I think that obviously came along to all athletics and to the world was COVID. That killed us, and we lost 2 years of championships. 2 years of championships opportunities for the student athletes, and I agree with the fact that they, extended it to the juniors and seniors, but we've got one more class, I think it is, of those freshmen, and then that group won't still have that extra eligibility and kind of reel things in a little, but I would say that. The success of the league and the student athletes, to me, has been the most gratifying thing.
As you move on to other endeavors, you've left things in a pretty good state, and I did want to give the opportunity to give some kudos to the guy who's been your associate commissioner the last couple of seasons, Todd Bell, who has really stepped things up in a terrific way on behalf of the league.
Yeah, Todd was a great hire, and again, I can't take all the credit for that. I did recommend him, but we increased the salary and benefits considerably for us. I'll go back to the first year. First guy, never mind talking about my salary, but what the first guy got was $24,000. He quit in April. As soon as the season was over, I had his resignation.
It doesn't go far in Boston.
It did, and then we got David and. The same thing, and we got Stefan, but it was bumping things up, trying to improve things, and I finally said, listen, with social media the way it is, with how fast things are moving, we need this guy, and we need to pay this guy. And the executive committee gave him the money, and he's standing here, and if you look at the last 2 years that he's been here, what he's done in terms of our brand and getting us exposure and the negotiations with Flow Sport and negotiations with new contracts and stuff, helping he's been outstanding.
Well,
outstanding.
I'll tell you from a coach's perspective, and I know we got to wrap it up here, but I've talked to a lot of guys. I don't think Atlantic hockey wouldn't be where it's at without your leadership. And you know what? You were instrumental in getting us in the league once, and very instrumental in getting us back in the league again. So, from me, thank you. And I know everybody feels the same way. So, enjoy your retirement. I like the trophy named after you. That's hopefully we can get one of those. We actually it's regular season, right? I got 3.
Yes,
of those. I got 3 of those already. So
I'll tell you, that was a surprise that the directors pulled on me, and I had no idea that was coming. The night they did that to me, I was like, as a matter of fact, it happened at Niagara, and Simon Gray and Steve Butler they were holding a box, and I didn't know what was in the box. And after they did that, as I'm walking off, I said, so I guess now that you've named the trophy at me, there's no chance there's a set of car keys in that box.
and you're not dead yet.
No.
Well, Bobby, thank you for always being open with us. We've enjoyed our great relationships over the year. Enjoy the next steps and enjoy
hopefully
the
there'll
endeavors
be
ahead of you. There will be a lot ahead, I still believe. So,
well, thank you very much.
Bobby.
Thank you all. And Derek, good luck.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to break and come back with more of USCHO Frozen Four live from Tampa.
I've been waiting for this for a year. I've been waiting for this.
Passion, talent, development. NCAA hockey offers all that, and its players graduate at a 90% rate. Jonathan Taves.
Backhand scores! Wow, what a goal!
Joe Pavelski. And Johnny Gaudreau were stars on campus before the NHL stage. Whether you are a fan or a player, nothing compares to college hockey. Visit collegehockeyinc.com and follow @collegehockey.
Champions of the college hockey world!
Well, we're back with our second hour of USCHO Frozen Four live on this Wednesday from Harpoon Harry's Crab House in Tampa, just a short walk from Amalie Arena, where their motto is, it's not just a restaurant, it's an adventure. Harpoon Harry's serving great seafood, sushi, and steak. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. And, Jim, we're joined by our next guest and someone who I think we can count as one of the big fans of our weekly podcast.
I'm so excited for this one. I had to run to the bathroom. That's how excited I was.
If you listen every Monday, you hear us talk about a person who tends to grade us on our performance each week. I think I've gotten 1A this year.
I've got more than that.
School's got more than that. But Hockey's Commissioner Steve Metcalf, it is always a pleasure to get to chat with you. Do we get to grade you tonight?
I think that goes without saying that you should absolutely give me a grade, and I should lead by saying long-time listener, first-time caller.
Not true. You were here last year.
How's it going in Tampa? Yeah, I mean, it's one of those cities that everybody looks forward to.
Yeah.
We were just talking a little hot, but we can't complain.
Yeah, look, I'm someone that prefers a little cooler temperature than this, but I might be the only one here who's said it. I'd like it a couple of degrees cooler, and as all of my Minnesota friends have noted, the weather back home and what it's like here. But no, Tampa does a fantastic job, and I think, quite frankly, for all the accolades they've gotten over the years, this may be shaping up for one of their best.
You went through it last year. Hockey East, the host in Boston, did a fantastic job. Some great crowds at the TD Garden. You get to sit back and relax, but what everybody's going through this weekend, Wisconsin, the Tampa Bay Sports Commission, explain to people how difficult it is to put on a Frozen Four.
Yeah, there's a lot of details, and usually you've got this kind of overarching stress or anxiety about selling the tickets. And so one thing that, St. Paul and Boston have never had a problem with is selling tickets. But some of the other sites sometimes that's been more of a challenge. But, I think Tampa, if I'm understanding correctly, is sold out for both days. So that hasn't been, and I don't know how much, how hard they had to work at that or how easy it came. But, and then I think it's all the details about making sure that the teams and the student athletes have like an absolute first-class experience and you've thought of everything. And, Rob Higgins and his staff here in Tampa, they're some of the best in the business. So I'm sure they've thought of absolutely everything.
Well, obviously 3 times, but I think your history and obviously doing that last year with Boston and Hockey East being the host, I think, comes from the committee. And you talked about it. We went through a couple rough sites there for a little bit.
Yeah, and I think what we wanted to do, on the committee, and I was on the committee for 5 years, so I went through 2 voting cycles. As someone who, when there's compliments or criticisms about the sites, some of that is on, my fingerprints are, for better or for worse, are on some of those. But I do think, we've got a nice little situation going now with Boston. This is going to be successful. As I just mentioned, St. Paul next year, no question, and then after that we go St. Louis, your hometown schools, and then Vegas, and certainly everyone thinks Vegas is going to be successful. I'm someone, as you know, thinks that St. Louis is going to be successful.
Big fan. You were a little bit of driving force.
Yeah, I just thought that the Blues and the organization, the building, really, really interested in this and really interested in college hockey. And I think youth hockey has grown around the area. Obviously, the Blues have had some success. So I think it's a city that we should go to. And obviously, we're going to go there. But I think we could be in a really nice stretch of successful and big crowds at the Frozen Fours, which is what we all want.
Stepping away from the Frozen Four, but we're talking about attendance. Your league, Hockey East, at the TD Garden this year, they kind of won the attendance for 2 very good crowds for both nights of your tournament. That is an event that is really regrowing. I know that there were some great years in the mid-2000s. I think the NHL lockout fueled maybe one of those great tournaments. But right now, it's probably one of the best events that the league has been able to put on year after year.
Yeah, we had a really good year. I think the best attendance we've had in 10, 11, 12 years at the Garden. And really, if you think about a 13-month stretch at the TD Garden, and maybe we go a little further back than that, the last 2 Bean Pots have been huge crowds at the Garden. We had a great crowd a year ago. We had a better crowd at our championship this year, and then we had the Frozen Four in there sold out. So if you think about big-time college hockey events at the Garden, I mean, they are really killing it. We were really happy with our crowd. I think we're trying to make it into a big-time event that it's you don't need the perfect you don't need the participants to carry the water with attendance. It's all you're always going to get some of that, and Merrimack brought it this year big time. But we want to make sure we want to have like a core group, like a real foundation of fans that come because it's a big college hockey weekend in Boston, and I think we're getting there.
Okay, so when Jim got a low grade and I got a high grade, was a controversial weekend review. Ed, do you know where I'm going with it?
Mm-hmm. I know where you're going.
Frozen Fenway. Here's your chance because I had an hour, Jim probably had an hour. I got an A, he got an F, and now he might be a B-ish, right?
But the reason, like, his grade improved, and the reason that you got a good grade is because you correctly pointed out some of the positive elements of doing those games for the student-athlete experience. And then I think a week later, Jim finally saw the light, and he came around a little bit.
You beat him over the head with a club.
That's right.
See that light.
And I think, some of those events, look, I know there's challenges, and this year we had a very unique situation where we did a women's game that was a conference game, a men's game that was a conference game, and a men's game that was a non-conference game, and then the ECAC did a conference game. Hockey East wanted to do 3 non-conference games, and that was my intention. But the participants in 2 of those games said, no, we're happy to make this a conference game. Okay, I'm not going to fight about it, but I thought the better spot should be a non-conference game, and I know that's ringing true with my colleague down at the other end, Ed.
You never graded Ed, though.
Well, I have graded Ed, but usually Ed stays above the fray, but I do think that doing some of those events, that special lifetime experience kind of situation for the student athletes is worth doing.
You know what it is on Mondays? Usually you're out walking your dog.
That's right.
Or you're driving home, and it's usually about 7-ish.
Yeah.
About the phone rings and Steve Metcalf.
That's right.
I can always tell when your dog has just had a very long walk. Hey, I want to go back to your tournament. Obviously, you mentioned the attendance at the Garden. You had great attendance on campus sites.
Yeah.
For the opening rounds, you've been the league that has gone to that single elimination throughout the whole tournament. Is it going to stick?
Yes, I think it's been a success, and I think there's lots of different reasons for that. We moved to that format once we went to every team being in our tournament, which we had not been at, and I think the two marry together very nicely. I don't have to tell any of you that we had a very deep and competitive league this year. And so, having everyone in made sense. No one likes to have a bye that time of year, so we certainly do not have a bye. But then you also, the success of your regular season, if you finish in the top 3, you get something more than 4 does. If you finish 4, you get something more than 5 does. 5 gets something more than 6, and 6, 7, and 8 get something more than 9, 10, 11. So you're playing for something all through that path. And I said to one coach or AD at the end, they're like, well, we played 2 games on the last weekend of the regular season. We've got to go play Wednesday. I go, win more games in the regular season, then you don't play on Wednesday. So I think it's, and we also have 7 playoff games on 11 of our campuses. 7 of them have a home playoff game. And I think that's magical. On the quarterfinal day, I think we had 2 sellouts. We had a great crowd at BU. And then who was Northeastern, Northeastern Mess.
It was a good crowd.
Yeah.
I called that game, and that was a good crowd.
So I would say, you had, a 3-quarter sellout, a 3-quarter sellout, and 2 sellouts for the quarterfinal games. It's great, And then before you even... Maybe this isn't even one of your questions. Let's just fast forward to regionals, because I'm someone who's very excited about the regional attendance. The regional final attendance was dynamite. And I'm someone that, perhaps you guys know this already, I like the current format because there's no format that I think is better than the current format. I'm not saying it doesn't have flaws, but I love to see a really successful attendance, atmosphere, experience, revenue, at the regionals, and we had that this year.
Did you listen to the opening of our show?
No, he was probably in transit over here.
But that's exactly what we talked about.
Yeah.
See, you get an A for that.
Yeah, but what we also talked about is we were talking about, the perceived that there's going to be a hierarchy and a low.
Yeah,
and this kind of puts that a little bit of away. If they would have went out and I thought the committee had a home run. You've been the chair.
Yep.
I've been on it. I thought they had a home
great
run.
Job.
Yep, we talked about it. But if that wouldn't have happened, then people are going to start talking about the home campus sites again.
Yeah.
And I don't think nobody could talk about that this year.
No, I don't think anyone's going to like to stand on after this year. And look, was there some, did they get lucky with the right teams winning in the right region? Yeah, I guess that's fair. You could say that. But the committee put the right teams in the right regions, and they gave them a chance. And then, out of the regions, like arguably the best 4 teams in the country are here, I mean, maybe there's one team that might argue against that, but, I mean, I'm not sure they'd hold water. So you've got 4 big-time programs here, and you've got, and they came out of the regionals and had a great atmosphere and a great environment, in their last game before they got here, which is exactly what we want,
You mentioned regionals. Boston University came out of Manchester, obviously representing Hockey East. Didn't have a team in last year, which maybe as the host probably made things a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But now you have a true rooting interest in this weekend. This Terriers team, red hot.
Yeah.
I was talking with Jay Pandolfo today about the leaders, the seniors. I mean, this is a rare BU team. You don't see a BU team that is usually this old, has this many experienced players. They put it together at the right time.
Yeah, they're playing really good hockey right now, and they've been playing it probably for how many games in a row now? Nine games. 9 games in a row. But I would submit to you guys that BU has played their best hockey this season in the last couple of games. They had some hard-fought games to get out of the Garden and win our championship, and then went to Manchester and obviously, were successful there. They, I talked to Mike Schaefer after the regional final game, and one of the things he noted to me is he goes, BU is better defensively than they were when we played them, 2 months prior. I think they've got all the things you mentioned, Jim, but I think one of their goaltending has been really good the last couple weekends. I think Drew is playing, just playing probably the best he's played all year. And then, Fensori and Lane Hudson, I love those guys. I mean, those guys can skate, they're quick, they can move the puck, and they can also contribute on the scoreboard.
Yeah, you mentioned it earlier, Merrimack, fantastic season. Nice to see the Warriors get back toward the top of this league. They're still trying to get that championship. I think they felt they were really close, much like UConn was a year ago. But we see that they're going to have most of their team back again next year. That's a fantastic statement for what Scott Borick has built at that school as well.
Yeah, no, I was in Scott's office maybe, about 10 days ago, and he was getting a call from Alex Jeffries, right when I was sitting there. He goes, Steve, I'd love to talk to you longer, but this is much more important.
A lot.
No, he managed to keep all of his guys. I think they've got something magical happening there right now. They really had a great team this year. I think as a group they want to play together obviously a little bit longer. They've added a couple of guys, I think really quality leadership guys to their team as well. So, all things are pointing to Merrimack being pretty strong next year.
Well, I don't know about you guys. I have A- moving toward an A for our Commissioner Metcalf here today.
You know what? If he tells the Merrimack story after they won the overtime, you might be up to a borderline A+. You got to give that story because I find that humorous. I'll give you the backstory. You went to 9 games that day, didn't you?
Oh my God! Yeah. So that was a wild day.
Yeah.
What was that? That was the quarterfinal day.
It was the women's regional final.
Yeah, and I went to my daughter's high school state championship game in the morning, and then I was going to BU in the afternoon for a late afternoon start, and then. I just kind of thought maybe that was the end of the day. Well, you know what? I'll pop over to Northeastern, and so I get there. I see Jimmy. I could probably get there halfway through the game. Then that game goes to overtime, and I'm kind of lollygagging around a little bit, because I think I'm just going home now. But then the BC and Merrimack was still playing.
Northeastern women.
Oh, Northeast. Yeah, Northeast. That's right. Watching Northeastern women while I'm there. Then they get back, so I'm talking to them. And so I watched overtime with the Northeastern women's hockey team, just standing up against the boards at one end of the rink. And then, so then I go and get my car, and then I talk to Kate McAfee or Brian Smith. They're like, "Hey, Merrimack is still going." I go, "Really?" So then I just start booking it up the highway. And so sure enough, I get there in the between the first and second overtime and watch them get the overtime winner, and the sheer joy that the whole building erupted with was just great to be there for them. And so I go in, I wander around.
This is the story.
I wonder. Oh yeah, I forgot about this part. I'm wandering down and I'm going to look for Scott Borick, and I'm kind of following. Next thing you know, I'm in the middle of the locker room, and there's all the team there looking. And Scott just came in. He's like, "You're going to talk to the team," but I'm just standing there. I'm like, "See you guys at the Garden," and they all go crazy. And I walk out the door,
and then went home.
I went home.
All right,
wow. Now if you'd been invited in the other locker room, it might have been a different story.
Yeah.
One last thing as we wrap up this segment, and I know we could talk for quite a bit. You've probably heard us mention a couple of times with the retirement of Bob DeGregorio and also with Steve Hagwell. Now you entering what's going to be your third season as commissioner next year. You and Don Lucia. Is it 4 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Time flies. All right, so you and Don Lucia are going to be like the senior guys around the table.
Yeah, Don actually mentioned this to me yesterday. He said, because he came in a couple months after me, and he was kind of looking at me like, oh, my goodness, like I'm second longest tenured right after you, and we've only been here 3 years. It's a lot of look, there's some great people that have retired, out of some of these chairs, like, Bobby and Steve, and obviously Joe in my seat before me, with a lot of also historical knowledge of what happened here. So as I said to Heather Weems earlier today, I go, Jesus, I hope I remember, what the hell's going on around here. And then I kind of reminded myself, we came out of, Joe retired, then we had this COVID, and we could kind of get our bearings. We could figure out how some things of the league worked, and now we can come out on the other side and we can do a championship or two, and like Jimmy mentioned earlier, we've had some success with it. But so hopefully we've got our legs under us now, and now we know what we're doing.
I think you do.
And last thing, do not. You keep telling people that you got this cycle. I keep telling people that I got this cycle. We can't be in the same room because I'm claiming Tampa, Vegas, St. Louis, all that, and you're on the other side of the building claiming the exact same thing. So,
well, you were around for 1 4-year cycle, but before you got on, we had voted.
Pittsburgh, Buffalo.
Well, yeah, let's not. I'm not saying I get it right all the time.
So you cannot. We both can't claim that it was us.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I know you're a big fan of St. Louis, so you're with me on.
Don't let Schaefer be saying it's him too, though.
Yeah.
I will give you one more quick answer. Boston bids in this summer cycle.
Oh, absolutely.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's good news for hockey fans.
Yeah.
All right, Hockey East Commissioner Steve Metcalf, before we let him go.
Low A.
I don't know. I'm going to give him the A+ because you said you mentioned that story. You get the A+.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be back with more of USCHO Frozen Four live from Tampa in just a moment.
Man, do I love card night. You ready, boys? You got a king?
Go, fish, Dad.
Oh, come on. This is WWE superstar Titus O'Neil. It only takes a moment to make a moment. Take time to be a dad today. Learn more at 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov.
Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to USCHO Frozen Four live from Tampa. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. And Jim, let's bring in our next guest.
He is the Director of Communications for College Hockey Inc. I'm going to say this. Well, I'll introduce you. Jayson Hajdu, great guy. You've been around this game for a long time. But I've always said College Hockey Inc., the marketing arm of college hockey, but I feel it's doing more these days than just marketing. It feels like the role of College Hockey Inc. continues to grow.
It really has evolved, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I know it was formed in an effort to educate particularly American-born players on the college hockey path and how to stay eligible based on the various paths to college hockey or wherever the destination would be. And you're right, it really has taken on that marketing function over time as almost a secondary or a second primary function to promote, grow the game, tell the stories of the game. You know, conferences have to tell their own stories, schools have to tell their own stories, and where we can fill that void is telling everyone's story and focusing on the 30,000-foot picture.
Well, with success, we were talking earlier today. Joe Bertagna was in here. We've had a couple of commissioners pop in, and there does seem like there's a lot of discussion. I know you folks are always up in Canada, especially talking to players what they have to do to stay eligible for college hockey. But major junior has always been kind of that hurdle that has always been discussed. I think it's the kind of the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. But it does feel like there's now becoming more of a push to maybe get major junior players eligible for college. How much would that change what you and CHI do?
I thought you'd save the biggest questions for Mike on Friday.
Might as well start it with you.
Twice. Well, you know what? You have big shoes to fill after Nate. So
you're not kidding. I'm reminded of that daily. But you're right. It's always been at least a surface level issue. But we've seen in the past few years where several players have come from the CHL for whatever reason, have ended up in college hockey, and that's kind of really intensified the conversation and the debate. And I feel like, and this is completely informal and anecdotal, and I feel like there's an appetite to at least pursue what the future holds. What that means ultimately, I don't know. I'm sure Coach Schooley can attest it's probably going to be a Naples topic. It usually is.
Every other year.
Yeah, right. Yeah. By the way, how many of these do you have left?
This week and then a wrap-up show. Yeah, don't get away from the question. I'm learning how to do this.
I know, but you guys fill my Monday morning. There's going to be an adjustment.
Yeah, I
don't chirp you like Metcalf does.
Yeah, don't get away from the question. It's one of those things. As a coach, I'm concerned because I don't know how that's going to change the landscape. Because then does the kid who commits to the high-end kid who commits early and wants to go down the college path, does he go, well, you know what, I'll try major junior, and if it's not as good, then I'll go there. And it gets the Owen Power that goes to major junior, because then he can always go back to college. I think there's a slippery slope, as a coach's opinion.
Yeah, I was going to say, you could poll 50 coaches, and every other person will have a different opinion, and I think the unknown is what concerns people. From a College Hockey Inc. standpoint, we're confident enough in the product, we're confident enough in the skill level and what college hockey provides that college hockey will still draw high-end impact players, no matter if it's a straight-line path or a bit of a meandering path. We're confident in the product, we're confident in the life experience and the graduation rate. All of those things college hockey offers, we're confident that will still pull in the best players of that age. One route or another.
Right now, and I know we talk about this quite a bit every year, but about a third of the NHL has come through college hockey. And I know for myself when I'm watching an NHL game and I hear a college name called and even hear announcers pointed out, it's exciting. And then I think back to last Friday night, glued to the TV watching Devin Levi have his debut with the Sabres. That when you see those kind of results, it's got to be a great amount of satisfaction to College Hockey Inc. to see those results happen.
It's incredible. Like the first thing I do when I get to my laptop every morning is I go through the previous night's NHL goings on and I update our spreadsheet. 2 players debuted, 3 players debuted, 4, and last year we had a record number of players, 349 college hockey players in the NHL last year. I don't think we're going to hit that this year, but we're approaching 320. Right now it's the third most. And it's on Thursday, the Colorado Avalanche are going to play. They're going to have 8 players in the lineup who played for schools in this Frozen Four. 8 players. And there's at least one on every team in the Frozen Four. That's just seeing the numbers, the NHL numbers just rise and rise and rise. It's really it's fun to watch. It's very cool. It's very cool. And I you guys know this. I come from a CHL part of the world. I'm constantly texting friends, family. See so and so? Yeah, he played college hockey. So and so, he played college hockey. It's a fun little thing we have.
So, Nate, I know Nate started this sending out every night of games to Pierre Maguire because everybody always gave Pierre Maguire trouble, and he'd say, "Hey, so and so from Denver, coached by this guy that Nate sent out." And that was great for college hockey because he was constantly on their mouths and their.
Absolutely.
Is that still going on? Are you still doing little things like that? And is it harder now because ESPN's taken over and there's a lot less stability of the same announcers? Is it? Talk me through that, how it's working out now.
I will say, actually, ESPN and TNT as well have been great partners this year. We make sure we eye their schedule every week, and whatever games they're showcasing, we put together a package of game notes for them for that night's broadcast that are specific to college hockey. Not only the players in that game, but also what's happening in college hockey. So they get the best of both worlds in those note packages, and they've been really good partners. And things like you mentioning Pierre dropping the schools into the broadcast, to us, that's vital. When you watch an NFL game, you're constantly reminded of where these players played collegiately. It's in the starting lineups. It's dropped in by the announcers. We want to get hockey broadcasts to that point. That's honestly one of our goals, is to make sure that's second nature on NHL broadcasts like it is in an NFL broadcast or an NBA broadcast.
I want to talk about another partnership, and it's existed for some time, but every year that you see it renewed, it always, I think, brightens up a lot of American fans' eyes. TSN in Canada broadcasting a ton of college hockey up there, whether it's on their actual network or on their streaming platform. It's exposing this product, and I know I have friends that went to college with me that now live across the border, and they're like, "Hey, was that you on a TSN game?" And it was me on a NESN game that ended up on TSN.
Yeah, TSN's also been a great partner, and it helps. They have so many different. There's 5 TSN linear channels, and they have a robust streaming package. So we work with them on a monthly basis, putting together a schedule. Most of them this year were streaming, which is fine because our target audience, from College Hockey Inc. perspective, is the 14-year-old, 15-year-old prospective hockey player and his family and the folks that inform his decisions. They're watching online, so we're ecstatic to be online. And TSN, I think the number was around 75 games so far this year that they've showcased up to this weekend.
Most of this tournament too, right?
They did the entire tournament. All 15 games will be on TSN Plus, so we're really grateful for that. There's obviously so many Canadian kids playing college hockey, Canadian coaches coaching college hockey, and we see that as a pretty vital component to the recruiting process.
Speaking of recruiting, the international recruiting, not Canada. When I say that, I mean Europe, and I look at the lineups throughout college hockey. It feels like European players are making up more and more rosters. How much does that expand what you and CHI have to do in terms of international education?
We're aware of it, and it's important to us. We actually had a live event scheduled for Finland, I want to say a year, maybe 2 years ago. It fell through for a variety of reasons, but that was very much on our radar. Right now we do a lot of live events in Canada, in the United States, and ideally we would like to expand that to Europe. That's absolutely part of what we want to do to grow the game.
See, I think one of I was on the board, obviously, and then when we dropped our program, I had to go off the board. But I think one of the things that people don't understand what College Hockey Inc. does is they do with you and Sean. You do a lot of Zooms with individual teams.
Sean's a machine.
So they spend all these nights and. Like they spend a night at 7:00, and then he gets off at 7:45 with all the questions. He's on with another team at 8, and it's just informing kids about college hockey. And a lot of these kids know about college hockey and they want to be college hockey players, but there's still always that lingering thing out there, major junior. And tell me a little bit about how the numbers have gone down, because I think they have they not? From when there was a bad year in there. There was a really bad year.
Yeah, and I don't have those numbers right off the top of my head, but it was in the aughts. It was the number of American players that played in the CHL was at an all-time high. And
like 120, 110?
That sounds right. I want to say 127, and I don't know if that's right or not. And it has dipped significantly year over year since then. Again, I'll make sure Mike brings the numbers on Friday. He probably has those off the top of his head. But you're right, it has dropped significantly, and we take pride in hopefully we had a role in that in those numbers falling, because we're selfishly we want to keep the best American players in American college hockey. And Sean, I don't know if he's doing a daily Zoom meeting with youth teams and youth players, but if it's not daily, it's close, and he's based in Michigan, and one night he'll be doing one in Regina, Saskatchewan, and another night he's doing one in California. He's done some overseas as well. And it's just it's a presentation to these athletes, to their coaches, to their parents. We are a free resource. They can come to us with questions about academic eligibility, NCAA eligibility, to make sure that they're keeping that option open, that they're not closing a door unnecessarily.
And when Sean leaves, my son, who he's at U18 now, he started here at U14, he could do it, Sean's presentation.
Doesn't surprise me.
He's seen it 4 times, and, so you guys do an outstanding job.
Certainly with the transfer portal and players looking at options after college, the family advisor gets to be a big part of it. Do you have outreach or communications with those people to help educate them on the college route?
Yeah, we do have a line of communication with the agents and advisors, and in fact we host a breakfast every year at the NHL draft for the advisors and agents. Not all of them are maybe up to speed on all of the rules and all of the policies that come with NCAA hockey, so it's important to keep that line of communication open with them. And it's when you meet with parents at some of these live events, they're wearing the anxiety on their face because they're getting advice from a lot of different directions, and they just ultimately want to do what's best for their child and their child's pursuit of a hockey career. And we try to clear up some muddy waters for them and answer some questions directly for them, predicated on research and data and facts. Here's the facts. Make your own decision, but here's the facts.
Well, Jayson, Hajdu, we always appreciate CHI, what they do. We do get to talk to Mike Snee, the executive director, tomorrow. We look forward to that conversation. But thanks for your time stopping by here. It's always fun happy hour. I think this is 2 happy hours in a row for you. Last year you had it in Boston. You're back
right,
again,
not 2 days in a row. Not 2.
Well, you also, last year I was getting texts from Nate. He was laying by the pool.
Sure.
I haven't heard from him yet, which is, obviously you must be doing a better job than Nate now.
I won't go that far. Those are big shoes to fill.
Or you can just go lay by the pool.
That's an even better idea. I've got to go record my own podcast now with Schloss. So, yeah. But thank you for having me. We really appreciate your support of College Hockey Inc.
And we're going to take a break and come back with more of USCHO Frozen Four live from Tampa in just a few moments.
Passion, talent, development. NCAA hockey offers all that, and its players graduate at a 90% rate. Nick Bukestad.
Backhand scores! Wow, what a goal!
David Backus. And Zach Parisi were stars on campus before the NHL stage. Whether you are a fan or a player, nothing compares to college hockey. Visit collegehockeyinc.com and follow @collegehockey.
Champions of the college hockey world!
on who it was, another top pick, one before Power, and then he played with Luke Hughes, and I'm like, hey, man, just ride along the rails there and enjoy it. But Michigan, you think they're all offense, but they scare you so much with their offensive ability that it hurts a team coming at them, as they don't have the puck that often. They're controlling. They do not want to give away the puck. So I think that helps them. You're not chasing the puck. You're not going to have to worry about defense. So I think Michigan relies on that more. But like you said, that Penn State game was a great tester for them. A tight, low-scoring game. They didn't score. They were down late in the third and able to get a goal. So I think they can play both games if they want to.
Because they're in the middle threes, right, in goals against?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a little over 3.
Oh, yeah. And you can go back to Eric Portillo. He's not had a great year. Been a roller coasters, letting a lot of goals where you're kind of, scratching your head a little bit on them. But lately, just like with their discipline, Michigan's taken so many penalties here. I think at one point they had a 5-minute major in 5 straight games. You just can't continually to do that. They stopped doing that, and Eric Portillo's been solid, and I feel like they're peaking at the right time. We'll see what happens. It's going to be pretty cool seeing the top offense against the top defense, and we saw it last year in the regional final in Allentown. We'll see if Quinnipiac can kind of slow them down a little more this year.
We still need to see one of the two teams, Michigan or Minnesota, make it to the finals this week. But in past years, there's been a criticism of the Big Ten is not really getting there and maybe underperforming. Now, with the performance that the league had in the regionals and getting here to the Frozen Four, now all of a sudden you see people putting up maybe a little bit of a panic that maybe the Big Ten is in a position to dominate. I mean, you see the league throughout the season. Is either one of those scenarios accurate? Has it been underperforming, and do we need to be afraid of the Big Ten dominating college hockey?
I'll go with the first part. I think underperforming. I think everyone thought. I mean, when I was playing was when it started talking about let's get the Big Ten conference,
right?
And it took 10 years, and then they got it. And I think the timing was a thing with that. When you think about it, Minnesota was really good. They were dominating. Michigan and Michigan State were down at that time. Penn State was brand new. And then Ohio State was pretty good, and Wisconsin had a couple good years. We were talking about half your conference struggling. You only had 6 teams at that point. I think it was just a bad time for it to start in terms of where those schools were. But now the slow build-up to where it is 10 years later now. It's crazy. It's been 10 years. It maybe started that with that Frozen Four in 2018. You had 3 out of 4 teams make it. It was kind of a Notre Dame's first year, I believe. That maybe started to kind of get people, more looking at the Big Ten. And now it's scary now more. If you'd asked me this, I don't know, a month ago, I would have said, yeah, we're it's on the right trajectory. But now with Mike Hastings, my former junior coach, don't want to give him too much love here in case he hears this, but terrific coach. Now he's at the University of Wisconsin. If he just coaches the way he did at Minnesota State, adding in the resources that he has at Wisconsin, they're going to be right back there. And then what Adam Nightingale's doing at Michigan State, getting from the transfer portal and then recruiting. I think he got a goalie for next year. He plucked from Michigan, Augustine, I believe.
Yeah.
It's looking like it could go that way. Who knows, 5 years, but right now it's trending that way.
You ever wonder back when you were at Ohio State, charter flights, NILs, meals all the time?
The meals thing would have been great.
How much better you could have played on?
I think I heard. Well, I would have saved a few bucks, that's for sure. But at the least, I think I saw Logan Cooley might have an NIL deal with Chipotle. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah. You don't even. And if I'm in college, I'm not thinking of money. I'm thinking just going to give me a card that says I get free burritos. That'd be all I would.
All you ever wanted.
When you're 18, 19, 20, that seems pretty good to you. Obviously, things have changed a lot, but. That would have been interesting, I think, and the transfer portal thing where guys can, if they're unhappy, they can move on and not worry about sitting a year. And there's just a lot of things going on.
I also think, though, that hurts kids from battling through adversity. I've had 3 of our bigger alums that were instrumental in us bringing our program back. If they would have left after their first year because they struggled, they wouldn't have been there. They wouldn't have. I mean, I mean, sure, probably you go through it. You went through it. You had players that went through it that fought through it and were better on the other side.
Sure.
Now they just leave.
Yeah, I think that goes to like a lot of like upbringing and family and having to work for stuff. I think it goes a long way. I remember I go to juniors and play in Omaha for Mike Hastings, and I got there and I was like, it was the big jump for me in the terms of play, and I struggled mightily my first year. He threw me at center because at fourth line because I'm like I couldn't get any higher, and I didn't. I stayed the line. I grinded it out for 3 years there, and it ended up being worth it. But when I went to Ohio State, it felt like a country club. And not because we didn't have to work hard, but I fought through the tough times,
right. And
he made it so hard that he made the transition easier. And I just think that it's good for you to have a little diversity. Now every guy's different. Maybe a coach changes or moves like you're seeing, or sometimes the coaches are the ones saying, we don't see a role for you now. So I think it's a combination of all. But I don't love it for how easy it is a little bit for some players. But usually the guys that work hard get rewarded in the long term.
We're talking with Paul Caponigri, talking Big Ten. He works for the Big Ten Network, also at ESPN. And I go back to the Big Ten tournament, and I watched that game over last week. And I couldn't help but think. I mean, it was a great win for Michigan. Way to get that game. I mean, Ed and I have been talking probably since January. We were hoping for a Michigan-Minnesota national title game. It's just
sure.
You just want to see those wagons against each other. But you get into that game. Could that be looked at as maybe a good loss for Minnesota? I think you gotta lose every now and again.
Sure.
And it's one of the most difficult things when you do lose those games. But could that be the good loss they needed?
I think everyone at Mariucci would say no. That was there because that's 2 years in a row now that Michigan's gone in there and in front of 10,000 at Mariucci and said not so fast. I think the playoff format hurt them 2 years in a row, being the number one seed. And I'm not here to criticize the Big Ten. They have their hands full with 7 teams and scheduling out, and I don't know if the money's a factor, but a 7-team league having 3 weeks to decide the playoffs is too much, I think, for me. And Minnesota played 2 games in 3 weeks, so they got out of rhythm. And they had the 2 times they had byes during the season, they didn't do well off of those byes. Not excuses, but I think they catch them at the right time. It would be interesting to see that final again. Michigan's got the one team that can say, hey, we got just as much talent as you. And sometimes when Michigan's kind of playing and they're not even clearly it didn't affect them playing in front of 10,000 in Mariucci. It's rocking because they just go out there and play in it. I think it's the same thing that's going to happen here.
So did you just give inside info there? Minnesota does not play well after a bye. They want to talk betting tomorrow.
Well, okay, yeah, right. No, they struggled at Wisconsin and the week after a bye, and then I don't say they didn't play terribly against Michigan State, but I wouldn't say they played their best game off the playoff bye week. And then only one game against Michigan the next week, and then you wait, and then like last week was a party for them. They got to play 2 games in a weekend. But that's it, and they talked about that. Bob Motzko talked about that as his team can have an issue sometimes in the past. This one's a little different because it's a half bye, and you're here on Tuesday.
It's not really.
And I think the
boat,
experience is going to help them. That most of them were here. Justin Close played, so.
I want to ask you one last question because
Sure.
we're running out of time. But is there maybe a vulnerability for both of these teams that they are now going to face 2 of the better defensive teams, 2 of the better goaltenders in this country?
I think it's the goaltender thing more than the defense. I mean, if you look back at last year's regional final, Michigan didn't have a problem with Quinnipiac's defense.
They didn't.
And, their style isn't changing, and it hasn't changed. It would be interesting if Quinnipiac were to get out to lead. This time, maybe Michigan got out to 4-0.
Yeah.
And I was just with Fred Pletch. He reminded us none of those goals were from Owen Power or Ken Johnson. It was Moyle. It was Van Wy was their fourth-line guys, third, fourth depth guys. But I think, yes, if Quinnipiac got out to a 1-0 lead or something.
And Minnesota faces maybe that same scare with BU.
With Comesso, and man, I was just blown away with leading up to the BU game and doing the studying and watching more BU. Like Lane Hudson is just ridiculous. And I can't wait to watch him and Logan Cooley going at it, and Nyes and all that kind of stuff, because that's what you want to see, right, in these moments. But Drew Comesso is really good in that too, and he might be a guy that's going pro in a week or so.
Right.
But I loved his demeanor talking to him too. He's just really kind of even keel dude, and I think the goaltending more than defense could be the hindering of a Michigan and Minnesota final.
What's your prediction?
Oh, Michigan and Minnesota. It's really close, but I think they're the better teams. If everyone plays their best game, those two would make it. Yeah. But I mean, it's college
best
hockey.
Goalie? Who's the best goalie
in this tournament? Yeah, Peretz, I think, is the best goalie.
Yeah.
But I think he's going to have the toughest challenge of the four guys.
With the
and in BU, and you guys might know more, the injuries have piled up. I've heard of one that might be there now too, added from when we saw.
Zabanet potentially, and
McCarthy are out, I think.
Zabanet, they say, is going to play tomorrow.
Oh, okay, that's good. But I heard of another senior forward. I don't know if
why am I blanking?
It's from a side source.
Skoog is a question
with a blocked shot, I think, from our games
last
in
week,
match.
in Manchester, yeah.
And then McCarthy. But that's one part. BU's, they're going to have those 4D playing the whole game.
It's a lot. It's a lot of them.
And the one thing that'll help them is the as you know, as we sat there, is those commercials help on ESPN. You're not the 2-hour game.
2 minute
you got those
commercials
2.5 minutes.
Fantastic.
You're like, hey, they're gonna be like Lane and Dom sit on the bench.
Well, historically, when I was on the committee, we had to and they go even longer now. The Frozen Four,
2.5
minutes.
Yeah, I think it was 2.5, and you have 3 of them, and then I'm sure there'll be a review or two at some point. I heard they're going to be wearing mics this time, the refs.
Oh, good.
I didn't like because we had that review early, and I'm like, can you say it so we know
what's going on?
And then the crowd didn't know, and they're asking us at the intermission. I'm like, I still don't fully know for sure what it is. So, but it's going to be fun for the top 5 teams. When's the last time that happened?
Never. Not in the 16-team era.
Right, in the 16-team era. So I can't wait. Let's get there. And plus, we're in Tampa. Every 4 years.
Not the worst.
Sign it up. Every 4 years. Vegas, Tampa. Vegas, Tampa. Get us. Yeah, you knew. I was watching those games. And then I have another city in mind for future, Nashville.
They never applied, but that is
well. I hope they do. Who do I got to call in Nashville to tell them to apply?
They never have. I was on the committee.
Doesn't it seem like a perfect fit though?
We wanted them to.
Yeah.
The big one that everybody speaks highly of, the best site that has never applied again, is Washington D.C.
Okay, I remember that one.
Love D.C. Miami lost to BU. Late.
Yeah. Wait, was that? Oh, that was Colby's shining moment. Yeah. So I got a funny story about that. I played men's league with Kevin Roeder, who was the guy who blocked the shot. So last year I meet Colby because we're both doing Blackhawk stuff. So I'm telling what I mean, and obviously Colby laughed about it a little more than Roeder did. Yeah. That was an unbelievable finish.
Illinois guy, yep.
An unbelievable finish to a national championship.
Well,
game,
Paul Caponigri, we appreciate you coming by and kind of handicapping this from the Big Ten perspective. Yes. There'll be a lot more to talk about tomorrow. We know that. It's a lot of guests coming up, but I know we're almost out of time here, Ed. Is that correct?
Yes, we are almost out of time, so we'll wrap it up here. Day 1 will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can find our podcast at uscho.com/podcasts, including a replay of this episode, or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. For Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Frozen Four live from Tampa.